Well, thank you for asking me, thanks very much to all of you, really, who are all friends, and I know many of you here in the audience today. Catherine Calderwood, the CMO, really was very keen to come and give this address, and the reason for that is that she's an obstetrician with a sort of no-nonsense surgical demeanour. She's also got a rank in the army, so she's not a woman to trifle with. But a lot of people don't know her mother's a psychiatrist. And also it's interesting to know that our Cabinet Secretary, Jean Freeman, her mother was a psychiatric matron in the Ailsa Hospital and talks very vividly about, at the kitchen table, hearing stories of terrible stigma towards psychiatric patients who were under her mother's care at the time. You of course know that our mental health minister, Claire Hoy, is a psychiatric nurse. So really we're very lucky in Scotland that there are people who really care about what you and I are trying to do and what we want for Scotland. Catherine can't be here today because obviously the WHO announced a global public health emergency yesterday, and you'll know that the four CMOs issued a statement which Catherine followed up, I think very realistically, saying that Scotland was highly likely to see a positive case. And you'll have seen in the news today that there have been 2 positive cases identified so far in the United Kingdom. I think the coronavirus, is the big story at the moment, and I was talking to Wendy a little bit about it just before it started, and I suppose as psychiatrists we can appreciate the distress for those that are affected by this, and there's the people infected, there are obviously the people quarantined, and the staff and carers who have to deal with that. And our thoughts really are with all of these people at this difficult time. But our general population also, I think, is the ground is right to, I think, alarm people perhaps unnecessarily. And we need to think about, I suppose, what we can bring, what skills we can do to help our population, our policymakers, our media interests, at a time of great uncertainty and great anxiety. It is a time, as the WHO said, for international cooperation and support. So it is not without some irony that at 11 p.m. tonight we are leaving the European Union. And I will say no more about that. Some people will believe that will strengthen our international connections and again will help in this joint work that we all have to do, and others may hold other opinions. I was also saying to Wendy, and if you'll forgive me for a preamble before I give the talk that I was actually asked to give, I was also saying to Wendy, we published the Health Behaviours in School-Aged Children report yesterday that didn't get much media attention because of the current situation. But for several years now, there's been really a very worrying rise in self-reports of distress, anxiety, low mood in young people, and particularly in young women. And I think this is a worrying time for people, and we need to, I think, be mindful of that. We are fortunate to have a strong, vibrant Royal College of Psychiatrists in the United Kingdom and also in Scotland, and I'm proud to be one of you. Again, if you'll forgive me and allow me, I want to pay tribute, really, I suppose, to the college and to the leadership that certainly the Scottish chairs have provided. Professor John Crichton has been a very helpful ally for many years to me, and before him, Dr. Alistair Cook, similarly, I think, really opened up a mental health partnership approach in Scotland. and again has been part of a very constructive developing story. You are constructive in your criticism and your challenge, and that's what good government needs. But I think also we should be very proud of the achievements that we have made working together. And I really would, I think the standout for me is the success of the Healthy Start, Healthy Scotland programme, which I think established really the ground roots for the big investment in perinatal mental health that has happened and has been committed to by government. And there are many other successes, and I'm sure people in the audience have been part of that. And I think, as I said at a previous lecture, these things just don't happen in a bubble. These happen because of the championship and the wisdom of you. And for that, government and I are very grateful. The last person I want to thank is our president, Wendy Byrne. I was having a look at your blog from 2017 when you announced your programme of your priorities, and I was just reflecting on those. I've followed your Twitter feed with great interest. I love the photographs of vegan meals and train travel. But you said in 2017 you wanted to hold the government to account on funding. And I think you've battled very hard to do that. And I think actually using data as a flaming sword is very effective, and I'm very grateful for that, because I've always said I think we need to have better data in mental health and indeed use better data. And I know Professor Crichton, I can't see him in the audience, but I know has been likewise working on that too. The promotion of integrated care was your second priority, your third recruitment and retention, and your fourth trainee support. So I think really the people who are in the college, I think, were clearly fundamentally important, and I think you should be very proud of the work that you've done, because I feel supported and I feel cared for through the college and through you, so thank you very much. Can I maybe now give my lecture, if that's all right? I'm borrowing this lecture from Catherine Calderwood, and it's written from a general perspective. I'm going to stick to that, because I think we need to try and see things in the broadest round. But I'm going to, I think, pull out the psychiatry in it where I see it, because this is about us as well as everyone else. So, if I can work the clicker. There we go. So this is the slide. This is the heart and soul of realistic medicine. And it was 3 years ago that our chief medical officer issued her first annual report, and this was the construct. And she set out 6 questions, which I think are of fundamental importance, and for which all of you have provided and provide excellent and beautiful examples that I'm hopefully going to remind you of. And I'll be embarrassing some people along the way by naming them, but not shaming them, actually congratulating and applauding them. So the CMO really wanted to know, could we achieve a new paradigm of care for the people in Scotland? And this vision reflected her conversations that she had with people about how they wanted to provide and receive care. And it was very evident at that time that a more personalised approach was the thing that was dominating conversations. So the 3 annual reports have evolved. There was realistic medicine, realising realistic medicine, and personalising realistic medicine. And the talk I'm going today is going to be talking about, firstly, what does personalising mean and the fundamental underlying construct of that. That is the first chapter of her annual report. The second chapter is the challenges associated with it. The third is about supporting the workforce. And the last chapter, the fourth chapter, is actually going right back to this and then saying, so where are the examples? What is it that we can do on these principles that's about personalised approach to care and treatment. Catherine's supported by a large team of eminent and worthy civil servants, and they have provided a series of quotes that hopefully will stimulate. So William Osler, 100 years ago, the idea of a personalised approach was really to the fore. And I think this is actually quite a good quote about variability as the law of life, has no two faces are the same, no two bodies are alike, no two individuals react alike and behave alike under the abnormal conditions that we know as disease. And he also said, listen to your patient, he's telling you the diagnosis. And again, I don't want to tell you the obvious about the importance of listening to people. As psychiatrists, you are expert communicators and expert listeners, and I know how much you care. But it does no harm to remind us about this, and as I say, this is for a general audience. So over the last 3 years, a personalised approach has become the central theme, and this is what the CMO hears when she goes and talks to people. Another quote, this time from an American, the Professor Montori is Professor of Medicine at the Mayo Clinic in the United States, and the chair of the board of the Patient Revolution, which sounds rather daunting. He talks about that we shouldn't just think about people's symptoms, but also their goals. And he talks about the fact that actually we need to share the responsibility actually with patients and people themselves, and actually that people have got a responsibility, some responsibility for their own health, and that we need to make people less dependent on us as health professionals, and that personalised care is not just nice to have, but a must-have. And he cites the fact that with our ageing population, complexity is increasing, and that we have to individualise how we approach every person differently because of that range of conditions, experiences people have. So again, this is it's from the same Professor Montori. He talks about careful and kind care, and actually this is something that really resonates very strongly with me. I think these are very simple words, but I think if you can hold them to your heart, they really make a difference in the real world to the practicing of medicine that we do. Careful care is obviously founded on the principles of quality, of safety, of best available evidence, and considers a patient's biology in the context of their biography. Kind care is something a little bit more subtle. It's about compassion, isn't it? It's about us thinking, what's it like for this other person whose situation and whose life might be very different from our own. And I suppose we can be helped to some extent in thinking about what would we want for ourselves if we were in this situation, or what would we want for the people that we care about. So in delivering careful care, our concerns about A&E are very strong, and they'll come across in this presentation. The respect recommended summary plan for emergency care and treatment is the first example that I want to give to you. But from a psychiatric perspective, Dr. Robbie Steele, I don't know if you're in the audience, but Dr. Robbie Steele from NHS Lothian, a fellow liaison psychiatrist, was really at the centre of the patient experience and anticipatory care plan team. And this was a team of people funded by NHS Lothian to identify complex people that were using services regularly, and then to provide a kind of thoughtful care plan. And it's been hugely successful. The feedback from people has been overwhelmingly positive, but it's also reduced attendances at hospital. And that's not just a good thing for services, it's also a good thing for people themselves. Now, I don't know about you, the what matters to you conversation, and if you're aware of that, but the CMO published, I think, in her second report, a series of questions that she was hoping patients would ask us. And because I'm working in government, I got a free realistic medicine lanyard, and I got a free realistic medicine plastic card. And actually, you know, I've got this attached to my NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde security badge. And this is kind of stuff that really, I suppose, seems pretty self-evident. But actually, getting people to have the information they need to make the right decisions, please ask your doctor or nurse, is this test, treatment or procedure really needed? What are the potential benefits and risks? What are the possible side effects? Are there simpler, safer or alternative treatment options? And what would happen if I did nothing? And I've tried to, I think, include that in my practice, and certainly, you know, I'm very considered now about the prescribing of antidepressants and other medicines, particularly in a liaison setting where people are often facing great adversity. But although that seems really very self-evident, I think it is important to try and help people to ask those questions and be clear that they're allowed to ask those questions. The second example which I want to give you of kindness is the Distress Brief Intervention Programme. And I did see Dr. Linda Finlay, who's got her head down over in the corner, who is really the principal advisor to the national programme in NHS Lanarkshire. And this has been a flaming success. Dr. Duncan Clark, I don't know if he's here, but he's the child and adolescent consultant who is now working on how we extend this programme to, we're down to 16, but now below that. And it's a really very, very simple idea. I mean, it's not even really a mental health intervention. It is simply people presenting in distress to frontline services, whether it's GP, police, ambulance, A&E, potentially schools, potentially Citizens Advice, potentially NHS 24, rather than being told, we can't do anything to help you because I am an orthopaedic surgeon and you are drunk and your husband has had an argument with you and you've scratched your arms and you're not sure if your children like you or not. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I don't really have a response for that. The Distress Brief Intervention Programme offers, within 24 hours, the guarantee of contact and then up to 2 weeks of supportive listening and problem solving, where the person in distress themselves is in the driving seat of identifying what it is they can do about the difficulties that are in their life, helped by a properly trained person from a third sector organisation. So although psychiatry is strong in it, this is not a treatment for mental illness, and this is not a service that revolves around a diagnosis. And I think that potentially this is a very important and exciting direction of travel, that we need to somehow or other separate our response and approach to mental ill health, mental illness, and actually think about how do we help the story which is about mental well-being and mental health, and try to help the public and, again, policymakers and the media in trying to understand the difference of those things. So DBI has been smashing. It's had a formal evaluation which was published on Monday. University of Stirling are doing a proper big evaluation in 2021. And Linda, Duncan and I are doing all we can, I think, to spread this throughout the country and make it available to every citizen here. Next thing, I wasn't sure where to put this, so I put it in this kind and careful, but you could put it anywhere, and that's really, I suppose, about advanced statements. And and I think this does for people who really need help. This is about people with predominantly mental illness, who are going to potentially be subject to compulsion in hospital, and this is an opportunity for them to have a very personalised conversation about what matters to them. And the Mental Welfare Commission, have worked really very well with the service users to create these. And I'm sure you people have seen the videos, but they're very powerful in terms of people talking about how this has really mattered to them. The conclusion, of this first chapter of realistic medicine is about that the focus has to be on people, understanding their preferences and values, and the focus also has to be on the service that we provide and that we strive to provide, and thinking of it as careful and kind. I've got to go on to the next chapter now, which is about the challenges, and we have to be realistic about these things in realistic medicine. Interestingly, the major barriers are not ideological. When you talk to people, and we did a survey, and the vast majority, 95% of people in the survey said, these principles do match my own values and my own beliefs. The greater challenge was about the current healthcare landscape, about, how are you expected to do all this, perfection in services that are under pressure, and financially and from staffing points of view, and also, I suppose, in terms of the change to the way we have to work now, and the landscape that we work in. The chief medical officer sort of set a target of trying to kind of achieve this by 2025, and she is determined to try and push through the vision and values, and I think her position is, and I will allude to this, is that it's not necessarily about resources, it's much more about culture and attitude. Her report says that as well as encouraging people to be asking questions and feel reassured that their own beliefs and choices and preferences are not going to diminish the quality of care that they receive. She also says that we as professionals must feel able and willing to ask the right questions back and give clear, honest and realistic answers, and to challenge appropriately where necessary. And again, this for me echoes with my earlier point. I think about the mental well-being to mental illness spectrum, and I suppose how we see ourselves and are seen in terms of what it is that we do and what it is that we can say about that. Because I think people get confused, and you'll have heard yourself numerous times. People in the media will say, "I've got mental health," meaning I've got mental ill health, but actually often they don't really mean they've got mental illness or they mean that they're unhappy or dissatisfied or they've problems in their life. I think a thing like the distress brief intervention indicates that we are not belittling those problems, and we're not saying those problems don't matter, but we're saying that actually, the better response is not about pathologization or the rush to specialism. Citizens' jury, the CMO used the citizens' jury to ask members of the public about their thoughts on shared decision making, and I found that a very valuable exercise. Some people had expressed concerns about whether the public were actually willing to engage in all of this story that I'm telling you, and whether the public can actually be realistic. But the process that we went through showed that actually when you give people the information they need, the public can often, can make very practical and very sensible recommendations about how best to provide value care. And the top 3 recommendations that we had were a programme to inform and educate people, training, and an opportunity for an independent person to join conversations with professionals and patients. And again, also this is seen through an acute physical illness lens, but that was really what mattered to people. So again, I suppose as a clinician, this is the question that people will be saying, where do I find the time? And it's got some legitimacy. Our health service has never felt busier, and there are certain situations, as you all know, where it would, we should give more time, but it's just simply we don't have the ability to do that because certainly as a liaison psychiatrist, I may have a queue of people waiting to be seen. And although I might not mind staying after 5 o'clock in order to successfully discharge a patient, there's a clinical team waiting for my input, and that means that you are to some extent clock watching and thinking about what you're doing. The evidence suggests that while lack of time can impede shared decision making, the primary factors are often actually attitudes and skills. And there's another American Rabinowitz who did some looking at general doctors and found that actually, on average, a doctor interrupts a patient's opening monologue after 12 to 18 seconds. I hope I give a bit longer than that, but it's very easy, isn't it, to just step in and talk over people. I seem to do that both in my clinical life, my personal life, and my professional life, and it's a very difficult, habit to break. And actually, when left uninterrupted, patients typically will speak for 30 to 90 seconds, often disclosing significant concerns if they're just allowed to do that. And I suppose hopefully our training in psychotherapy has allowed us to tolerate a little bit more silence and to tolerate actually creating a bit more space that patients can fill. But it is difficult, isn't it, when you're busy? Spending time saves time. I told you about Dr. Steele in the audience because it's beautiful. The pact is beautiful. I don't think it is. Anyway, the patient experience anticipatory care plan. Putting in that extra effort, and it wasn't psychiatrists doing this. It was a team of people doing it. To actually really listen to people, work out what the problems were, think about what you could do, actually meant that a lot of time was saved because people didn't come back to A&E, they didn't see the GP as often, etc. And again, if I could step outside from psychiatry, the rather beautifully named Silver City project from the Granite City of Aberdeen, and I saw an eminent colleague from Aberdeen somewhere up the middle aisle, Dr. Palin, I don't know where you are, but I don't know if you're aware of your Silver City project. But again, this is a old age medicine construct, and it basically was a GP practice that's interested in old age medicine and the complexity of it, beefing up their multidisciplinary team and bringing in the local old age physicians to have a sort of case conference around 4 to 6 cases each session every 2 weeks. And not only doing that in isolation, but also feeding back the results to the patients and their families as well. And just through doing that, through that anticipatory thinking about people's situation, they've reduced referrals to geriatric medicine and reduced the amount of time that actually is needed by GPs and geriatricians with people. So this has been simple and innovative and very good. And then the orthopaedic team at the Glasgow Royal Infirmary, so they used to, anybody that had a non-operative limb fracture, then referred from the emergency department to the fracture clinic, and everybody came to the fracture clinic, and there was a face-to-face discussion, and they kind of thought, why are we actually doing this? Why are we following up people with simple fractures that actually don't really need any intervention at all? So they made changes and created an opt-in clinical helpline and a virtual clinic, so that if you do have a fracture and actually you're worried about it, you can go and talk to somebody. But actually, if you don't, then you don't really need to. And they've had great effects too. So that 40% of people require, less than 40% require a face-to-face interview. That's a really big drop. And actually the majority of people are satisfied with the pathway outcome and helpline. So, if you look at the resource saving from that, it's really quite significant. Example from us, Dr. Elaine Lockhart, are you in the audience? Don't know, are you here? Dr. Elaine Lockhart, as you know, our beloved child and adolescent in the most meaningful and helpful way. So, that we've published this and wrote to boards to ask them to use it. So the conclusions of chapter 2 are that a more personalised approach towards our patients and our citizens can foster their engagement, allowing us to understand and co-create the care they really value. And actually giving time to patients often saves time for professionals and can appropriately redistribute work using really all the assets that we have in our teams. And that can improve patient care rather than undermine it. And the CMO has seen, lots of examples like this. She's always very stimulated, I think, by the commitment and excellence that she sees as she travels around Scotland. So chapter 3 is about the workforce, and it's about how do we support the workforce to deliver personalised care. And you'll be aware that the GMC 2018 report on the state of medical education and practice in the United Kingdom found that 60% of United Kingdom doctors reported that satisfaction with their work-life balance deteriorated in the past 2 years. 3 out of 10 doctors felt unsupported, and 1 out of 4 doctors said they'd consider leaving the medical profession at least every month. And these are really quite sobering and distressing things to read about in what for me has been a fantastic and incredibly stimulating career, and it's very sad to see this. So we have to make sure that our workforce, which is our most valuable asset, are also, I think, properly considered as people and people with needs and need looked after as well. This is not just about being nice to people, it's also about the financial costs and the effects on patient care of burnt out and sick staff and disenfranchised staff. So the report concluded that the medical profession is at a critical juncture, and there, as you know, are similar challenges for our colleagues in non-medical healthcare professions. I suppose just to say it again, an effective and sustainable health and care system focuses on meeting the health and well-being needs of everybody in that system, not just about the patients and the carers, but also the staff, the providers of that service too. And I suppose that you can use the term the ethic of reciprocity, again coming back to this idea that really that you should be making the care that you give the care that yourself would want to receive. And again, that's a double-edged sword. That's about the system caring for us as much as we care for the system. And Peter Homa is the foundation chair of the NHS Leadership Academy, and he contends that it's first and foremost a moral duty for us to look after staff, and that will make the whole system more efficient. So I suppose some practical things that the Scottish Government's done, in no particular order, the professional compliance analysis tool is a mechanism for I suppose looking at training. The decision agreed between Scottish Government, NHS boards and the BMA that from August 2019 the rotas of all junior doctors would include mandatory 46-hour recovery periods after runs of night shift. And the Let's Remove It campaign, which was launched by the Royal College of Surgeons, and we are in their rather beautiful room today, of which I'm incredibly envious, is about tackling cultures of bullying, undermining and harassment. But we know that these conditions are not just owned by the surgeons. So the Health and Care Staffing Bill was completed in February. The bill seeks to ensure safe, high-quality services, creating better outcomes for patients, improving the well-being of staff. And following the GMC, I was pleased to be able to sit in for a while the UK-wide review of students and doctors' well-being that was being led by Professor Michael West and previously Dr. Dame Denise Coya. So we should be proud of our successes, however. It is not all gloomy. In the most recent national review of the Scottish Deanery, the GMC identified many areas that are working well, defined as not only meeting standards but well embedded across organisations. And we gauge staff well-being through the iMatters staff experience continual improvement model, and we've some evidence that that's having a positive impact again across specialties. Now, what's taken off again in a kind of acute setting is Schwartz rounds. And 1994, a health attorney, Ken Schwartz, was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer in Boston. And what he articulated very clearly and very well at the time was that what really mattered to him were simple acts of kindness from caregivers. And I'm sure all of you in the audience who have had experience of requiring care and treatment themselves will probably echo that sentiment. And he set up a legacy. I'm sure health attorneys in America are able to set up, have a legacy to set up a centre, and that was created in Boston. And the Schwartz model then came out of that. Now, one of the civil servants I work with recently came to me with great excitement to tell me he discovered he was the great nephew of Ballant. And I was again thinking, well, what's the difference between a Ballant group and a Schwartz group? And they look actually pretty similar. As far as I could see, the Ballant groups, and again, please, the psychotherapists, I'm sure, will correct me if I'm wrong and hold me to account, but there is a more psychedelic feel to them. There's more a consideration of transference and counter-transference, even if those terms aren't necessarily used. Whereas the Schwartz groups are much more kind of like here and now about what the problems are. They're not about clinical decision-making or teaching, but they're an opportunity for teams to come together and actually, I suppose, blow off steam about difficult situations that they have got. And they've attracted a great deal of attention. It's interesting seeing these things that are kind of considered to be the great leap forward, and then you say, but what about Ballant groups? There's a point of care foundation with a website that's doing facilitation of these, and there was an evaluation by the King's Fund that you can find on a website that found that they are very helpful for people. And I think any situation where we encourage staff to actually think about what they're doing, give them the space to reflect and talk about how things feel in a safe way is all to the good. I actually don't care what they're called. The simplicity of it really belies its impact and effectiveness, and this is sort of moving, I think, a lot of acute services forward, and in a similar way to the fact that we have been the forerunners with community provision. You know, a few years ago, the kind of shifting the balance of care into the community seemed to be some, you know, incredibly exciting, brave new idea that, of course, we had already done decades before. And I think to some extent the Schwarz groups are following on our coattails and petticoat tails from our thinking about how we support each other and how we support particularly people in training. So the other thing, of course, that's important, you know, when you're at work is that you have a compassionate leader, and that you know the supporting a workforce in isolation isn't enough. When the NHS was founded in 1948, its core work value was about compassion, and it was to serve a society that was still deeply traumatised after the war. Again, you know, the concept of compassion is something that I think we need to build into what we're doing. Professor Michael West is Professor of Organisational Psychology at Lancaster University, and his vision of compassionate leadership is laid out by these 4 behaviours. That attending is paying attention to staff and listening to them with fascination. Understanding is talking with staff to understand better the challenges they face in delivering care. Empathising, displaying empathy to staff, particularly as we know that between 30 to 40% of people are actually pretty stressed from maybe things in their personal life as well as at work. And helping maintaining a focus on staff to do their jobs effectively. And again, I suppose when I was preparing for this lecture, I was reading these things and with a sort of escalating sense of panic, because I was a medical manager for almost 12 years, and I look back and I think, did I really take the time to listen to staff, or was I just doing what I was saying about patients, and that's cutting through conversations too quickly and not listening to what people were saying, and the people in the audience who I've managed over the years, if I have done that to you, then my apologies given to you today. So compassionate leadership, it's fundamental. Peter Homa echoes Michael West's sentiments by talking of compressing the distance between the board and the ward. And he talks about he says that patient safety conversations are a really very potent mechanism for understanding the challenges that staff face. And simple but open questions can open up a wealth of vital information, such as how safe is this ward or department? When was the last harm event? What do you think the next harm event is going to be? What might we do to avoid it? And that, I think, makes us accept the fact that risk and things happen in however good a situation we're in, system we're in. And but rather than being complacent, we can think about what we can do to mitigate those. Just before I move on from these kind of components, Sir Muir Gray gave this quote: "A good steward leaves the farm in a better condition than they found it." And so the 3 components I've already discussed about engaged patients, a supported workforce, compassionate leaders, that Sir Muir Gray talks about what he calls the culture of stewardship. And that's about holding something in trust for another generation. And I quite like that idea. I think that's something that makes you feel quite proud and feel quite engaged in that idea of, I suppose, the tradition and the handing over and the holding on. And it also means that you have a sense of, this isn't all about me, and it's not all dependent on me. So I like that 4th thing. And of course, we have a drawing that with 4 cogwheels that hopefully tries to give a visual sense of how those 4 aspects of engaged patients, a supported workforce, compassionate leaders, and a culture of stewardship will fundamentally help with our vision for realistic medicine. So the last chapter in realistic medicine is takes us right back to where we began with that slide with the 6 different points on it. And it looks at all 6 of those through this lens of personalising care and treatment and the synergies behind each principle. I'm going to sort of go into some of those in just a little bit of detail. We did a study in 2018 looking at good practice and shared decision making and consent, and we got these findings, and I think quite interesting to read. And it echoes a lot with what the citizens' jury said. But also, I, as probably many of you, have been involved with the concerns, I suppose, about psychotropic medication, and I suppose more recently about what is described as prescribed drug dependence and withdrawal, which, of course, is often about the drugs of dependence like opiates and benzodiazepines, but has also been talked about in terms of antidepressants. And I think certainly I've become aware that actually it's the patients really do struggle with a lot of this, and that perhaps our response isn't as good as it could be. And I don't mean our psychiatrist's response, I'm meaning really the pharmacists and nurses and doctors and all of these people who are involved in that forms of treatment. So the findings here are quite, when you look at it through that sort of sense, provide more guidance on effective ways of communicating, to explain risks, benefits, outcomes, alternative treatments, to have some national, what's the evidence-based information about stuff that we can rely on, to provide clear guidance on appropriate use of high-quality decision-making aids, and staff with education and skills to communicate properly, and how to build supportive relationships to enhance person-centred consultations. Now, we're all psychiatrists, and I'm embarrassed to talk about improving our communication skills. But again, something that we learned, and I see Linda's got her head down again, but again, something that we learned in DBI was we thought we needed to do some teaching for frontline staff about being compassionate. And actually, you'd think that would go down like a lead balloon, and actually it hasn't. We have a very short 45-minute Learn Pro module about what DBI is, but actually people have found it very valuable, and I did it myself, and it actually is really quite makes you think about how you behave and what you do. There are we've been doing work to kind of gear things up. The Scottish Government has, and NHS Education for Scotland has appointed a lead for realistic medicine, who is a gastroenterologist from Hare Myers, Dr. Helen Mackey, and we funded 20 realistic medicine clinical leads across the health boards. So if you don't know who is your local realistic medicine clinical lead, then please find them, and again both challenge and support them, and say, so what are you doing about mental health? What examples are there locally that we're doing stuff like this? Nice little graph for people who for the clever in the audience. So I think this is quite a kind of neat way of hopefully explaining to people that if you, that not necessarily doing lots and lots and lots of stuff to people is actually helpful for them. So again, if we were just to think about antidepressants as an example, there are people for whom antidepressants are necessary, and we would hope that the size of the positive effect would be the greatest for that. There is a level of harm and risk from side effects, which is what it is. For some people, it may be appropriate, and it might be for those people the benefit is not so great, however the risk remains the same. For some people, we reach a point where it might be inappropriate. So, me being tempted into giving an upset and distressed woman with breast cancer an antidepressant because it gives me something to do, actually may be an inappropriate thing to do with almost no benefit beyond perhaps some sleep enhancing, but all of the side effects, harms that prescribing another pill is going to have. To then, the absolutely futile, and quite erroneous prescribing or treating, where there will be almost no benefit whatsoever, and it will be eclipsed by harm. And of course, this is all tied in with, I suppose, a fundamental understanding of the right resources are finite. And that mature explanation of, well, why am I not going to prescribe an antidepressant for you, needs a little bit of care, so that it isn't interpreted by a patient as my problems are not are being ignored or are being reduced in some way. But it's about explaining that things can be managed differently. And in renal medicine, they've got really, really powerful of beautiful research about renal dialysis. And I worked in renal medicine years and years ago, and it's just horrible. I mean, it was just. I'm a bit soft, but the people living with really terrible chronic renal failure. The burden of having to come for hemodialysis is absolutely massive. Hours and hours sitting on these dialysis machines. I know Steve Potts is in the audience, and again, he'll understand the burden of hemodialysis better than anyone from his work in laser psychiatry. But when the research evidence really showed that life expectancy really wasn't significantly increased in a lot of people with hemodialysis, but actually the quality of the life through the year or 2 years that they had to live was far worse. That actually, when you explained that to patients, that many people would say, actually, you're quite right, I don't want, I just want conservative treatment of managed diet and fluids as best I can, and I don't want to be having hemodialysis. And I think that's understandable, but we have to find the ways to help people understand those decisions and make those decisions. And if renal medicine can do it, then other places can too. I was talking at the beginning about our president and Professor Crichton holding Scottish Government to account by the use of data. And we have an atlas of variation, which initially started off with the easy graphs of knee replacement and hip replacement and surgical things. And this year we managed to get in some very uncomfortable maps of variation across Scotland in some mental health constructs. So you can go online and look at these, and it displays that across Scotland there is a 23-fold variation in ADHD prescribing in under 15s. There is a 1.5-fold variation in antidepressant prescribing in 15 years and over, a 3.2-fold variation in antipsychotic prescribing in 75 years and over, a 4.5-fold variation in dementia drug prescribing in 55 years and over, and for adult mental health length of stay in general, adult and also in old age psychiatry, 22-fold variation between different areas. And if you show that, as we have done, to the public, it is scandalous. I mean, it's ununderstandable. And the whole purpose of the Atlas of Variation is to highlight this variation. There is some explanatory narrative, but it does not say what the correct rate of anything is. It doesn't say that high or low is good or bad, or that the average is ideal. It doesn't say that. Instead, it's a tool that provides informative and easily accessible data to allow clinical teams to question, debate and explore the variations demonstrated and use these to promote quality improvement. And I think, again, one of the things that I think we should be very proud of when we're looking at the evidence base for what we do and how we know what works, the work that's happened in electroconvulsive therapy, uncomfortable though that might be every year when it's published, and the press just wants stories of the horrors of the asylum. Actually, the Sean report, and I don't know if anybody in the audience is responsible for it here today. Dr. Alistair Hay is the chair, and Linda Cullen is the long-standing clinical coordinator. But it's an absolute monument of a really great example of using data to describe process and effect and the experience of it, and effect both in terms of hard clinical symptom reduction and people getting better, as well as side effect burden and all the rest. And it tells us very clearly, loud and clear, that ECT works and matters in Scotland, and my thanks to the people who are involved with that. Okay, so I said to you there were these principles at the start, and we're trying to look at them through this sense of personalising. So we've done the first two, and we're managing risk better, and this is quite challenging. And I suppose the first ever report on these principles, I was the person asked to write the chapter on managing risk, and I was thinking about it from, I suppose, our perspective. And that sort of sense, I suppose, for doctors, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And the landscape that we live in, where we know from the research that the clinical risk assessment tools that we have don't actually, they don't predict risk. That we still use them because they are aid memoirs for us for considering risks and broadening our care planning for people and kind of communicating that. But actually, it's as it's really tough being a psychiatrist. Bad things are going to happen. If you're seeing enough people who are ill enough, bad things are going to happen. And somehow or other we have to work in that landscape, and also help the public understand, as that graph earlier showed, that effective treatments all are going to carry with them some element of risk, and that's can't necessarily be taken away. We've got our Scottish Patient Safety Programme that we're very proud of, and the mental health principles I'll talk about in a little minute. But it's a tough one. How do we manage this? How do we respond to complaints and critical incidents and learn from them? The safety principles have been boiled down into these four areas, and you'll know all about them. That they're about communication, leadership, least restrictive practice, and physical health. And great work has happened on this. Many people in this room will have been involved in the run charts and the experiments to see what we can do to try and help these things, and it's been really hugely successful. Healthcare Improvement Scotland are obviously, the name is, as it says on the tin, they're working on trying to improve various aspects of what we're doing, whether that's how we observe our inpatients, how we learn from suicides and critical incidents, but also, they're about to start work on early intervention psychosis, and that's very welcome. And our National Suicide Prevention Action Plan really, is an attempt for us to address the concern about rising suicides nationally that we saw in the last year, but beyond that, the fact that really every life matters, and that suicide prevention is actually everybody's business. So the last bit of this sixth thing, and this is my call to arms for all of you, is about becoming innovators and improvers, or I should say improvers and innovators. And I mean, when you're thinking about your job and feeling burned out and feeling stressed and feeling understimulated, I mean, this is the thing that one of the ways that you can help yourself actually is to allow yourself to have bright ideas and then pursue them. And there are so many wonderful examples. I mean, the job that I've been doing in government, is a fantastic place for people continually coming with good ideas, and often that they've already they've put into practice and achieved, and credit to everybody who does that. We've set up a mental health policy and research forum in Scotland. We're going to have our second meeting on Wednesday, and it's an opportunity because what we realised was we really want the academic evidence to inform policy in Scotland, and also we want policy to inform the academic evidence, and having a much closer relationship, I think, is to be welcome. And again, a kind of good early example of that is Glasgow University's research on lithium, and Professor Danny Smith. I don't know if you're here in the audience. I'm very fond of Professor Smith because he's very grand now, but he was actually my first senior house officer in the days when we had senior house officers. So I always feel I can shamelessly patronise him. But his team very vividly illustrated that lithium wasn't being used as much as it should be, and really as a consequence of that, you'll know that we published lithium guidance to try and assure people that we should be using it and how we should be using it safely. I'm almost finished. I think I've got 3 last slides, and I'm going to go back to acute medicine and tell you about lovely work that happened in Ninewells Hospital in the emergency department there, where the kind of whole design of services and journey through emergency department was thought about by having students shadowing patients through their journeys, which might have been a somewhat daunting situation, but I'm sure if I was in an A&E for 4 hours, it might be quite nice to have a student shadowing me. So they wanted to see how long we would wait, to see what might happen, and they produced a wall chart, and that is it. And that led to some simple innovations, including they discovered that only 1 in 5 patients knew any of the difference between any of the staff that they saw, and there were other redecoration that happened in the units to assist people. So I'm finishing where I started, realistic medicine, and I want to suggest to you that actually, we can do these things. And I hope that I've illustrated that these are in fact interrelated and interdependent. The CMO's first report was a call to arms, and I hope that as a profession we have more than met that, and we should be proud of what we have done, and we should be working as we always have for really the well-being of our patients, but also of ourselves. So thank you very much. Thank you.